Good afternoon, this is Uxinity channel on education. How do we engage students in a conversation? How do we make them practice their and improve their fluency? We have spoken a lot about grammar activities and how to best engage students and make grammar activities engaging. But now let's talk about what makes an engaging topic activity. So topic activities are those activities that make students talk and practice their fluency. We're going to talk about topic activities today with Gracia Guzman in Malaga, Graham Bell, and Louis Morris here in Barcelona. You guys, the ones that are watching us, feel free to ask questions, send us your comments and your experience about activating conversation, and let's get started. My name is Radmila Grukova. So first of all, let's say that whenever we talk about topic activities or activities about fluency, we kind of tend to associate them with free conversations. And it's not the same to have a conversation and to have a topic activity which is well prepared and guided. So guys, what elements do we need for a good topic activity?
I think first off it needs to be appropriate and universal. So you've got to write something that everybody can use. Mm-hmm. It's all well and good having interests, but if they're quite niche, it would be difficult to talk about with the students. So something that's open, and sometimes it's a surprise what can go down well. Okay. So you have to experiment a little bit. I think as well as that, I suppose topics are most important to us, the three activities that we have, because we teach a conversational form of English and it has to be something that will inspire conversation. It's different to an open conversation, it has structure, but I think that that's the key thing for me, the subject matter.
Okay, so in this way, how are topic activities different from vocabulary activities, for instance? Because in vocabulary activities we also can have a discussion and...
It's true. I think vocabulary activities, structurally, they're organized more in so that the words that we're learning, the target language from the activity, will have the same semantic field. Mm-hmm. And the idea behind that is that I suppose the structure is there to practice the accuracy of the words. So keeping to that more rigid structure, with the vocabulary, it's more about the accuracy and using the words correctly, whereas the topic activity is more about fluency. I think it's more about being able to talk and express yourself, so it's a bit more open. But they will resemble each other quite closely.
Okay, so Graham, what do you think? Do we need to leave the topic activities open, or we need to provide teachers like a little bit more of guidance?
It's an interesting question because when you're creating the activity, you need your structure. You need to create your target language, give them something to maybe a video to watch before the class or afterwards. And you want to be planning it through and having your idea of what you want them to produce, whether it be an ordering, a sorting task, looking at kind of sequencing, or if it's pros and cons. But on the same hand, sometimes you go off a little bit off the reservation. If there's an important thing that's happened that day. I've had classes where my class has started and they've went, "Excuse me, Graham, I really want to talk about this." Mm-hmm. But if you're well versed in topics, you can lean on that kind of constructive knowledge that they have, and you can apply all the same tasks. When they talk to you, there's probably going to be target language that comes up. So although when you're making an activity, there has to be this structure, you can apply this same structure when you're experienced to something that just comes up.
It's true. It's organized chaos sometimes with topic activity. Yeah. It's like the swan, it glides across the wall, but underneath the legs are going crazy and the teacher has to direct the class. And I suppose a lot of that comes with experience, but you can pick up that it's going in a certain direction and then you can make sure that you include the target language. But I do think it's quite key that the student feels that it's open, because I think they enjoy this the most.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what practices do they enjoy the most in your opinion?
I think it's just, for example, debates, role-playing key as well to develop the students' fluency, because they don't feel exposed as a way of explaining, just speaking about their own opinion, and maybe in some topics some people are a bit hesitant. But if they take a role play activity, they liberate themselves. They can be who they want and give whatever opinion. So role play activities and combining also the role play and the debates, like taking different parts as well, I think that they are quite engaging.
Fair enough. And Graham, you mentioned before that sometimes there is something very interesting to talk about in class. So up to what extent can the teacher improvise a topic activity, or we need to kind of stick to a certain script?
It's about the experience of teaching topic activities. If you're used to from an activity made for you, then you have the kind of skill set to know where to direct something, which is a bit more open. It's about challenging the students' kind of status quo and what they think. Grathia was mentioning there about playing role play. Well, being devil's advocate as a teacher is great. If they say something, challenge them. If they think something is heavily positive, you go heavily negative and really see what can come out of the topic.
Yeah, definitely. And I think on that, you ask why. If a student makes a comment and then you just say why, then you could have a lot more time with them talking. I think we talk about how we want our classes to be 80-20 student talking time. So we want the students to talk most of the time, and it's very difficult to do that in grammar and vocabulary activities. It's more difficult. Topic is our chance to do that. So playing devil's advocate, asking why, having them talk amongst themselves is definitely the strong point of these things.
I think some of the question, open-ended question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for instance, whenever we talk about creating topic or creating topic activities, what are the recurrent mistakes that we have to avoid from your experience?
For me, the biggest one is, as I mentioned earlier, if it's not universal. If you write a topic and you have a very clear idea of how it works in your head, but you don't manage to relay that on the screen to other teachers, they'll just look at it and think, I can't teach this. Yeah. Or maybe the students, I've been to classes where the students tell me, please let's not have a topic about fish again. Or let's not have a topic about something niche. Someone's clearly an avid fisher or something, but the students, it just goes over their heads. So it's better to pick something that's fairly universal. I think food is very good. Lots of people like food. I've also never had a student who told me that their favourite food wasn't Spanish food. So that's something that you can play the devil's advocate on and say, actually, I think Spanish food is overrated, without really offending anyone deep down. Yeah. But they'll be a little offended, but in a good way, enough to talk about it and defend that they think Spanish food is the best. So something like that, rather than maybe something obscure. And if it is something obscure, that you at least manage to attach it to a way that the teacher can use it and make it familiar for everyone.
Okay, so a touch of humor is also a good idea. Fair enough. And how many activities per class? How many topic activities per class? Do we go for 1, 2, or does it depend on the level? What do you think?
I would say it depends on the level, because of course when you are teaching beginners, low-level students, they can't express themselves as good as, for example, a high-level student. So I would probably say that maybe 1 for the very low levels, and then the higher the levels, the more topics. I would say like, for example, 3 topics even. Okay. But I think something I would like to mention as well with the high-level students and the topics is that we have to also challenge them, because they can't speak, they can't express themselves, but we have to challenge them to maybe use a different way of expressing the same idea, to use vocabulary that they are not used to as well. So I think that's important in topic activities as well.
Excellent. Usually the introduction, the way we introduce a topic is crucial, because if we find an engaging introduction, it works fine. What are your suggestions in this regard? What makes an engaging introduction and an engaging topic?
I think that open-ended questions to begin with. The introduction questions can also help you to link activities. So having them open, the first questions at least, rather than being too specific. Because what you want to try to do is, through the conversation formed by the intro questions, is to lead into the topic. It's like, funnily enough, I actually have something on that. So it makes it look like the students led you to that point. I think that's the way to try to use the intro questions. So if it's too specific, it can sometimes be a bit limiting.
So for instance, if it's about music, if we just ask, do you like music? That's not what you mean. It's a closed question and they can say yes or no, and that's
exactly. Yeah.
What should we ask instead? what type of music maybe, or
and then you could maybe ask, why do you prefer that type of music? What type of music don't you like? What was the last gig you went to see, and where was it? Did you enjoy it? I suppose just anything that could lead to further questions rather than something that just shuts it off.
Okay. How many questions do you guys suggest to as an introduction? Or it's not so relevant?
I would say 2, 3.
Yeah, me too.
I think written down, I would completely agree, but the way that a class works, sometimes you have more reticent students. So what I tend to do is I use the questions that are written down as a basis, and then you build on that if you feel it needs to go. There's a lot of improvisation, I think, that goes into especially topic activities, because you want to try to make it work for your students, and you'll know your students better than somebody who wrote the activity for hundreds and hundreds of students will. So it always requires a little bit of bending.
This time, sorry, great, guys, go.
No, I was thinking you can also, sometimes I've seen develop in an activity can also be more effective than the introduction itself. So we teach predominantly Spanish people learning English, or Latin-based languages learning English. So sometimes a nice picture with some cognates that are in the text or that are associated with what you do. You want them to be guessing, almost problem solving what it's going to be about, because that's like an extension of the introduction. So sometimes the introduction can be 1 or 2 questions, but the first stage of your task can be more of an introduction. Just debate what they're a way to talk about.
I've got a question online, and a lot of people seem to be asking a very similar question. We've got Ben, we've got Paul asking, where do you get inspiration to make your activities?
Well, I would say the news, TED Talks, trending topics, even your life experiences,
Yeah.
Something may happen.
What news articles would you use in particular?
I will try. No, go ahead, Graham. Sorry.
I was going to say, you got to come from a good source.
Yeah.
If you're going to do a news article, you want to be checking where it comes from. You don't want to be taking something out of the sun and going with that, unless you really want to challenge their beliefs. But you want to look at the source and make sure. Sometimes when you're using, you're taking text, you want to make sure it's a balanced text. So you're a teacher after all. You don't want to be forming someone's opinion too strongly in one direction or the other. So you want to make sure they're a good source.
Broadsheet over tabloid then.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'd agree. I think for me it's the end of the news reel articles. It's like somebody pretending to be young enough to play college basketball, or a dog that can skateboard, something that's a little less controversial. We also had a lot of questions about controversial activities and what's too controversial. I think politics and religion are the things that come up often. I don't know how you feel about that. For me, politics can be good. It depends how it's dealt with, but religion is never good.
I think that as long as you take a neutral role, that you don't state your real opinion, or you take one part or the other, you can openly discuss those topics. And probably I tend to use role play when I do activities having to do with politics and so on, because you never know as well the background of that person or the interest that they may have.
That's true.
I think any activity can be sensitive. It's how well you know your student. You could be teaching something and they've just had a bereavement.
Yeah, that's happened to me.
It's about knowing your student and seeing how they react. Really.
It's true. Just one more question from Peter on the issue of the subject of topics. He says, is it sometimes good to pick something a bit more niche to test the vocabulary of the students?
Yeah, I think so. It can be sometimes, especially from your culture. People learn languages because they have an interest in it. Whether you're German, Turkish, American, Scottish, Irish, whatever, you have something from your culture that you can share with them, and it's very niche. They love it, in my experience.
Cheese rolling. Yeah, something strange like that. Guy Fawkes night is always fascinating for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bernard Catholic said religion is not a good topic, but it's an interesting holiday. Okay.
Yeah.
So we asked our teachers yesterday what they thought about topic activities, and we have many comments actually, and many questions. And I remember that some of them had to do precisely with what you guys were talking about. Some have to do with kids and teenagers. So what are good topics for them?
I will say there, sometimes when we think about teaching kids and teenagers, we limit the topic far more than we should, in my opinion.
I agree, especially
Because
teenagers.
yeah, because they are almost adults, like you said, with the teenagers. So you're gonna speak about politics. Of course, you're not gonna speak about something that's happening now, but maybe you can adapt it to them. You can speak about relationships. You can speak about even news. As long as you adapt it and make sure that the content is suitable for the age, I think they can speak about many more things
I agree with that.
than going to the park and so on, like tend to do.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that when you're doing a topic, it might be especially with teenagers, but sometimes you gotta, with any teacher, any class that you're doing, when you create the activity, it's in your mind. You're thinking about this task. Your student may be in the middle of a long day. They may be thinking about what their wife or husband's cooking for dinner or what they're watching on the TV that night. And you ask them about the rainforests of a part of the world, and it's not in their mind. So sometimes when you want them to form opinions about things, we need to make sure we give them actual information. We're not testing their general knowledge. We're testing their ability to construct that in English to produce it. And I think that's one of the things that whatever level you're teaching, you got to give them something to think about, not just ask them their opinion.
I think it's a really good point. I think one of the biggest errors that I see teachers make when teaching topic activities is they're trying to teach the student about something other than the English language. We're not there to teach them about Brexit, we're not there to teach them about anything like that, but to facilitate conversation. I think on the point of teenagers also, there's an assumption that sometimes we want to talk about things they're interested in, but there can be a little bit of like, who's this old person telling me about YouTubers and things like that. I get that reaction from them, because obviously once you're over 20, you're just over the hill for them. Much better, I think the things that teenagers don't get an opportunity to do, and the thing that most teenagers want to do, is express their opinion. Because when you're at that age, you have really strong opinions about the world, and maybe your teachers don't listen, your parents don't listen, they just tell you to grow up. So I found that, for example, here we teach a lot of teenagers, or we used to in Badalona, and when I went there, they all have very strong opinions about Catalan independence. So rather than give my opinion or anything, I just get them to tell me about it. And I'd never seen them so vocal. They all had very strong opinions about it. And it was great to get them talking, because normally they were like teenagers, not willing to come out of their shells. So it depends on the student, but...
Excellent. Louis, do you have any more questions or comments?
We do here. We have a question about writing activities. Should they... It's the way that it's come here. We get so many questions about the controversial activities. I'm not going to ask any more of them, actually. How long should a teacher spend teaching a topic activity? That's from Omar. How long should a topic activity last in a class?
I might have a controversial response to this.
Go ahead.
For me, sometimes when you're teaching a teaching activity, a topic activity, it can naturally expand into 3 activities. Before you know it, you're teaching a vocabulary exercise and a grammar exercise. And for me, if the student wants to talk and I can't get them to be quiet and move on, I don't mind. I'm like, the whole purpose, are they giving me their opinion? Are they expressing themselves? I've had topic activities that have run on for half an hour, 40 minutes. And I've wanted to move them on, but I've felt that this is constructive. This is actually teaching them. And I've been happy to go with it. So I may be different from other teachers in that opinion on that, but for me, it can be almost limitless.
I think
it all depends. I think that for example, if a topic is really engaging your students and you can bring the grammar points that you're going to introduce afterwards, and you can challenge them with some vocabulary that already you have planned to do, maybe it's a good way just to continue with the topic. But we have to be careful, I think, sometimes as well, because if it goes for too long, then it's kind of you lose track of what you were going to do. And at the end of the lesson, the student feels that they already have done that topic. They may have enjoyed it, but maybe they don't feel like they have accomplished as much as if they would have done a variety of activities. It's up to the teacher, of course, and when you are in the class.
So in this regard, there's a question: when do you know how do you know when to kill the topic? How do you read the students' faces?
I think it depends on the student's genuine interest and how well it's leading to a good conversation, because maybe you have students who it's quite hard to get them talking. If they're talking, you'd feel after 15-20 minutes, I don't want to actually stop them now, and I don't want to make them do something different when it's really hard to get them into this place. So it really does depend on, I think, the number of students, because you don't want to be having this conversation with 1 or 2 students and without realising it, another couple of students in the classroom are thinking, when are we going to move on from this? So it does depend, I think, on classroom size, on the students and their personality, and how easy it is to get them talking about something else. I think, like Dacia said, and like Graham said, really, with having free activities within the topic, that's interesting. The topics are the easiest ones to link to another activity. And if you mean that it's the same activity but another one in that you do call back to the target language, absolutely. You can use it to facilitate the grammar activity, absolutely. I think that's a really good thing to do. But just to stick on it, to try to, squeeze more blood out of a stone, so that you don't have to do another activity, I think it depends. But that's why I think it's good to do topics last, because you often have that situation, it's, well, I've got 5-10 minutes, I don't have enough time to do another whole activity. If you did the topic last with 20-25 minutes left to go in the class, then you're not going to have that problem. You can just allow the conversation to go.
Matt was saying that actually in one of the questions that he shared. He was saying that in the order of the activities that we should and how should we teach them. And he was saying that he tends to leave topic for last. And in a way, I agree as well, because I used to do grammar first, so then I could bring the grammar into the topic activity and challenge them to practice that structure in real context, But I think as well, it depends on the time of the day, on your students, because if you get to a lunchtime lesson, for example, they may be hungry, they are tired because they have a busy morning, and you want to get them to relax, to start speaking and to get into the flow of the class. Maybe if you start with a topic, then you can engage them a bit more, and then you can move on to the grammar in the same way. Maybe you can say a sentence with the grammar point you're going to introduce afterwards in that topic activity, and then redirect the lesson.
Yeah.
I have quite a few questions also about the variety of topic activities. Especially people are talking about how there's too many texts, or the texts are too long, but actually a surprising number of people are saying there's too many videos, and videos are hard to use because if you go anywhere without the internet, you just can't access them. So if a topic is dependent on a video, it doesn't work. That was Josh who said that. So with this in mind, how can we make sure that topics don't get repetitive?
Variety, I think, as well. And I think also offering alternatives. Because I always say, and I think I've said this quite a few times to many people, when you have a video, it's not only about having the video, maybe also have an image as a backup, have a few sentences as a backup. So have a list of words, so if we have different ways to introduce the same topic, then you can choose the one that fits well with the lesson that you're doing. And you have more options, to develop it.
I think a video, and at the end of the day, if the student's watching it, so it's kind of eating into the time they've paid for you to be there. So I always believe that when you make an activity with a video, it should be supplemental. It should be something that you can watch before, and they can have then a bit of constructive knowledge that you can then work with, or something they can watch afterwards. I don't think it should be the center point of any activity, a video, because it alienates you from the online, and I think it personally eats into the students' dedicated time with you.
It's dead air. Like I find it very awkward sitting there showing the students a video. To agree, I'm not one of the teachers who has a problem with texts. With long texts, I do. The problem is only for me when every activity has a text. But I find text a good way of introducing language in context. The other thing that I suppose a lot of teachers have talked about, and I think it's very fair, is that there always needs to have accompanying questions, which is sometimes lacking. I suppose now, because the teacher's tab is separate to the student's tab, often if you have a look, there are questions there that maybe it's not as clear as it used to be. But yeah, I do think we need to provide those concept check questions with them. Otherwise it's just a text with nothing to say how to use it. Maybe you don't use the concept check questions, but someone might.
And I think also with the videos, sometimes it's good if you show 10 seconds or 15 seconds, just to spark the conversation. But if in that case, I would suggest, if you're creating an activity with a video, I would suggest the minutes or the seconds that you want to show exactly, because then the student completely, afterwards. At least for that lesson, okay, I'm going to show 15 seconds, and that's that.
Yeah, and I get teachers' frustration at having nothing to text with. Pictures. Even if you have a text, stick a picture with it.
It just looks better.
Yeah.
It looks better. Yeah. It's visually stimulating. I know that Rob is a big fan of comic strips when they're used in classes, and not to lean on the tabloids too much, but sometimes with political stuff, there's some really funny little comic strips that you can just snip and add, and they're going to spark controversy sometimes, if you don't, not too controversial, but they can be really interesting. So to avoid text, if you're looking at a topic on, levels of pollution, graphs, they're really great to stimulate people's systems.
Definitely.
Bullet points rather than 200 words of
truth. I think the other thing with activities, topic activities especially, when I started the course here, we used to have a mantra that we said when you create an activity, it comes in 3 parts. And I suppose we still have those 3 parts in that we have the intro, the attachments, and then the wrap-up, or not so much the wrap-up, but the different types of attachments. So we had the I do, which is when you're asking questions of the students in the intro, and then we had the we do, which is when we all discuss the text or the video or the pictures. But the thing that I think a lot of topic activities are missing is the you do, which is the part when you hand it over to the students to take it. So that's make a presentation, have a debate, do a role play a game, whatever it is, something that makes you reach that 80-20 again, because you need more of the student talking. Sometimes the problem with the things that we talk about, the problem with a video, the same problem with the text, is that it doesn't allow the student to talk as much. So I think it's about having something afterwards, and then it doesn't matter. Well, obviously it matters if the text is massive, but it doesn't matter what you used before really so much, as long as you have that third part.
Some teachers have mentioned as well that they dislike it when they see in the target language or in the texts too many cognates for high levels, because it's not challenging enough. So the target language here again is an important part. Any advice in this regard? What to do? What type of vocabulary to select for low levels? What type for high levels?
Don't use cognates at all. Okay. Target language would be my personal opinion. You can use cognates, I said earlier, at the start. So if you have a lot of cognates that are useful, then you can have just an activation page where they can look at them and go, oh, look at all these words, I know these. And then you just use Google Translate to find out which ones are which. Yeah. You have target language you like, you can assess and find out straight away. Cognates are fantastic, but we shouldn't teach them because they know them. We just have to help them realize they know them.
Use it with lower levels rather than in the target language. I agree. I think it's difficult for teachers who are just starting out writing activities because they don't know. There's a tendency to think the long words are difficult, but the long words are more likely to be from Latin or French, so they're more likely to be a cognate, and it's actually those little words from old English words that are difficult. So it comes with experience, but then in the meantime, just use Google Translate. Yeah. We had one other comment about the grammar and spelling in activities, but when we were talking about this just before we went live, we decided that as you can edit that's not really a problem. Same thing with blank activities. If you see a blank activity when you're doing your lesson planning the weekend before you teach, email someone and it will be correct in time for you to prepare it. So again, this is just about planning and preparation.
Yeah. Definitely.
And if one does come up, then you can just deliberate mistake and test the students.
Yeah.
That's your parachute.
Well done for noticing that. Yeah.
Excellent. So, guys, any memorable activity from your experience? Something that you would say, "Wow, that was a great activity," and
So I was thinking about this, and I think one that really surprised me is we had a topic activity about lying to children about Father Christmas.
Okay.
And everyone had very strong opinions about this, but no one was offended because people really disagreed about whether it was a good thing to tell your children that Father Christmas existed or it wasn't. The article was with pictures and a text, and it basically suggested that it was bad developmentally to lie to your children about Father Christmas, which is something that all of us have experienced, whether it's in Christianity or there's lies in every faith. It could be the tooth fairy or the tooth rat, as it is in Spain. So that was an interesting one because it was interesting without being controversial.
Okay. Do you feel like expressing your opinion in this case?
I did express my opinion with the students, and I think a lot of students will ask us for our opinion.
Okay.
Especially on cultural issues. They don't want us to just be a devil's advocate all the time. Yeah. They do want to know what we think. But I don't think I would tell my children about Father Christmas, actually. Even though various things were told to me, I do question whether it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Graham, what about you?
Well, I take a lot of the TEFL. I see these young teachers coming through and creating topic activities, and there was one on it was to do with environment, and the student who was the trainee teacher who created this had put so much information, so the student was learning little bits, wasn't too much text, and the whole idea was to prepare them, to give them the structure for them to really do that you part that Louis was talking about earlier. I think that's, if you want the you part to work with the student, you have to give them something to work with. Otherwise, you get to this you part and you see them going, they have no idea what to say. And this teacher made it was all about saving the environment and what we could do, the causes and problem solving it. And it was fantastic. I love teaching it.
Excellent. Gracia, how about you?
For me, it was activity having to do with refugees. It was very clever how it was done, because the intro questions were about, okay, so if you have to leave tomorrow, you have to leave your house behind, what would you pack in your suitcase?
Yeah.
So it was very interesting because, of course, people were saying different, like this many clothes or whatever. And then the next part of activity was to show pictures of what some refugees packed. And for example, nobody said pack any food or any food that wouldn't go off. And because of course you're not thinking that you're going to have to leave your house and everything behind, and you don't know what you're going to get, because normally when you pack your things to go on holiday or to go on a trip, you know that you will find some shops or supermarkets or whatever. So then whenever we saw those pictures and we read a little article, we redid the question again. I said again, okay, so what would you pack now if you were in that situation? Did anything surprise you from that? And the discussion that we had, it was really good.
Excellent.
And the list that we first had compared to the last one was totally different as well.
Can imagine. Guys, that was great. I would like to thank you and to thank all the teachers that have contributed with many comments and ideas, and I promise that we're going to include them all in first we are going to post them in a blog post, but not only that, we are going to take them into consideration when planning the following courses for next year. So all these ideas were great. Thank you for that, and join us again next week at 12, next Friday at 12. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.